people at home to the July 4th Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee. We have a full audience here today. I hope you can hear me, but I can't see you. A lady just stood up. My voice has never been told I have to speak higher, so that's good. I will do that for you. Again, welcome to the crowd in the audience and at home. We have a very brief agenda today, but very important. So first, if I could just call the meeting to order. That, where the heck is it? There it is. The Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee agenda for July 4th be received and adopted as presented. Can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Carrier, seconded by Councillor Berman. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Just for the people at home, Councillor McLeod is in attendance. She is via Zoom. She's got a new puppy and did not want to put it in the crate. So thank you for being a conscientious mummy to your doggy. But we will see you at 5 o'clock. I apologize. I skipped over one bit. For more than 15,000 years, the First Nations walked upon us and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe, and many others who were families, friends, and communities the way we are today. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Ottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and its relationship it established with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. We acknowledge the reality of our shared history and the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community. We seek to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better and to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. So we've already called it to agenda. Is there any thing from business arising from previous meeting? Seeing none. Declarations of pecuniary interest? Nope. Deputations 5.1. 2022 Programming Partnership Support. Rosalyn Morrison is here on the behalf of the Institute for Southern Georgian Bay? No. All right, well, we're going to move along. And we will just put her back in. Staff report 6.1. C 2022-23 complimentary parking pass for charitable groups. Are we going to have a presentation on this? Is it through you, Clerk Almus?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Madigan. So we don't have a formal PowerPoint presentation. It's a pretty straightforward report. We'd like to institute a pilot project for the remainder of 2022. So the background regarding this, it came forward as a notice of motion and motion approved by Council to request staff investigate on a case-by-case basis options for charitable or nonprofit organizations to operate fundraising initiatives within the paid parking waterfront parks within the town. So paid parking at waterfront locations is a common practice for municipalities looking to control traffic issues, minimize safety concerns, and restore priority access to local residents. As such, Collingwood is one of the many municipalities within the area that has implemented such parking fees. Currently, all users except for residents are required to pay for parking at Sunset Point Park, Millennium Park, Heritage Drive, the Collingwood Harbour, and Princeton Shores, and collectively referred to throughout this presentation as the waterfront paid parking areas. We recently had two one was a charitable organization and one was a nonprofit organization operating within some of these spaces within our community in which members were ticketed. And so staff have prioritized or investigated different ways that we can allow these charity organizations to effectively fundraise within the town of Collingwood at some of these prime locations while still respecting the access that's provided to residents. So currently residents are able to get up to 2 paid free parking permits within the town of Collingwood for the waterfront community or waterfront parking areas. And that is in effect for the full season. And staff, after reviewing these, did come up with a number of concerns that do become prevalent throughout, even as we witnessed as late as this weekend. I believe Friday was a little bit overcast, so the parking wasn't at capacity, but Saturday and Sunday at these parks, many of them were at full capacity. So Collingwood residents, as I've mentioned already, have an opportunity to obtain 2 free waterfront parking passes. We also have concerns about when we were exploring various or municipalities that offer reduced rates or special considerations for these events that occur within municipal park facilities. There isn't very many that provide exceptions. Wasaga Beach does offer a reduced rate for specific parking lots if it's through their special event program. And obviously the City of Toronto has a very elaborate and comprehensive policy for their organizations that are wishing to hold and conduct such events, but it's very prescriptive on what is permitted between charity and nonprofit. We also are concerned about the events that are taking place during peak demand periods, how many spaces the event is requesting and percentage of available spaces remaining, whether there are other events occurring at the same time or location, how many times free parking has been granted to the same charitable organization or nonprofit groups, and if full parking lot closures are requested, there are various costs and liabilities related to such rentals, such as barricades, staffing requirements, garbage cleanup, etc. What staff are recommending, we do have the Community Recreation and Grant Program intake that provides in-kind services as well as various grants and donations to these types of organizations with our community. For 2022, that intake opportunity has passed. So staff are recommending that moving forward, it would be considered through an event application process. And what is being proposed is, first of all, continue to remind event organizers that Collingwood residents should ensure that they have registered for their annual free waterfront parking permit prior to the event. Provide up to 10 free parking permits for event organizers for the time period requested to set up, conduct, and clean up following the event. And we're recommending providing a 50% discount code for the duration of the event to a maximum of 1 day. And again, some challenges with this is that cell phones or smartphone devices with data are required to obtain the 50% discount. So again, that would have to be communicated through the event organizers as they're promoting their events in any of these waterfront parking areas. Staff are further recommending the 50% discount versus a full 100% discount, as the Parks, Recreation and Culture Department is trying to encourage that these types of events happen in some of the other less utilized parking or park facilities within the community where there isn't paid parking requirements as well. And it has not been identified in here, but following this weekend and knowing that we did have capacity for long weekend events, staff are further recommending, in addition to this pilot program, that we not permit reduced parking fees during long weekends. So from May 24th to a Canada Day, Civic Holiday, and Labor Day weekends would remain full price.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this? Seeing none, I will close public input. Can I get a mover in a second? Yes, clerk.
Sorry, thank you, Chair Madigan. We do have a number of attendees attending remotely, so I should put a call out to those participating today. So any of our remote participants wishing to participate following a staff report during the public delegation component here are welcome to press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and we will acknowledge you and you can unmute yourself to address the standing committee regarding this matter. There's not any requests at this time.
Okay. Excellent. So I'm going to request a mover and seconder for this. I'm going to assume, because Acting Mayor Hull brought this forward, that you will be moving it, and seconded by Councillor Berman. Any discussion from the committee about this? Keith, you want to go for last? You're the only one. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you.
You're the only one.
Through you to staff, just an acknowledgement for the work done to complete the report. It's appreciated. I was looking for a minor change, and I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to actually put together a very comprehensive report that I think will perhaps not only address the concern that I raised, but also other concerns as it relates to parking. I did want to just simply convey that I certainly was not looking for anything that would be contrary to the reason why we've implemented paid parking as it relates specifically, to the busiest peak times, which of course are long weekends, et cetera. And I think common sense would prevail that, most nonprofit or charitable organizations are likely not using the parks in those capacities during those times anyways, but it's good that it's addressed. And really the genesis was just simply that, if a group is using the waterfront for a particular activity, the majority obviously would be covered as residents, but if they did have either organizers or VIP or patrons that were coming from out of the community, that there would be some parking relief so that monies for the intended event or charity would be going to the charity and not to our revenue. So it's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Seeing no other discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. Moved by Acting Mayor Hall, seconded by Councillor Berman. C 2022-23 complimentary parking passes at staff report. C 2022 complimentary parking for charitable groups be received, and that council approve the pilot parking program to provide parking relief for charitable or non-profit organizations during fundraising events at the waterfront paid parking areas as identified herein. All those in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. 6.2. Well done, Acting Mayor Hull. That was very nice for you to bring that forward and just bring a bit of clarity for the parking stuff. It's hard for people that are just getting onto the app to understand it. So thanks for doing that. PRC 2022, the Arts and Culture Center feasibility completion. Director Culver. Afternoon, sir. How are you?
Well, thank you, Chair. Would you like me to proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So as committee members are aware, there's been a lot of work going on in the last little while regarding the feasibility completion related to the study that Nordicity Group had done and delivered last September. So we had indicated to council next steps in a process that we would undertake to try and push the feasibility through to completion. And a lot of that was reliant upon some community support through stakeholder engagement. It became a little bit apparent after forming some of the stakeholder group that we had hoped to engage that wasn't the most desirable route by the stakeholder group, which we saw as being a bit of an obstacle for us to be able to move through to completion in the process that we had initially indicated. So at this time, we're back here in front of council committee today, and council ultimately requesting to change direction a little bit and move towards a consultant-led approach. The challenge in front of you is that while moving forward with Nordicity as we have been is available in the procurement processes through the non-standard guidance, it's not necessarily, we want to make sure it's what council would want us to do. If not, we can go back out to market to seek the consultancy that would then lead the project through to completion. And you'll note the cost difference between the two as estimates based on research we've done. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at right now. We're just looking for some direction from committee and council to take this through to the completion of the next step in the feasibility.
Thank you very much. I'm going to invite comments from the public if you would like to come up. You've got 5 minutes. Please introduce yourself so we can be reminded of who you are. And so what I'll do before, so maybe at about 4 minutes, I'll just do this. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Bob Hart. I'm a
Mr. Hart, could you bring the microphone closer to you, sir? Just for the people at home, just
Better?
right up.
Okay. All righty. Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
And this is a group of passionate residents who've just wanting to bring an arts, culture, and entertainment center to Collingwood. We've been working on this diligently for the last, well, almost 4 years now, and things have been progressing to a point. But I have to make one point quite clear about our group, because there's been a number of discussions about this point. No members of our group have any vested interest in the outcome of this project. Our interest is solely in providing the community and the South Georgian Bay region a center that we can all be proud of. That point's very important, because there's been a lot of discussion about it. Collingwood and the region need and deserve this project, and it's certainly overdue, and hopefully it will be the third time lucky, because as most of us know, this is the third attempt at building an arts center in our community. CASE supports the report from PRC to secure the services of the experts to determine the location, the size, and the content of an arts center in Collingwood. We believe this is the best approach to make sure we get it right. We're only going to get one shot at doing this. This is a legacy project that will have a positive impact on the community and the region for generations to come. So it's necessary to force ourselves to get out of the moment and to think long-term when considering the needs and the opportunities of an arts, culture, and entertainment center and what is addressed by that center. It's time to build it, folks. It really is. But we do have a number of questions, and I don't know whether questions can be addressed or whether I can, at this point in time, or whether we can just point out for clarification.
Yeah, so each person has 5 minutes. So if they would like to spend their 5 minutes on each question, that's fine. And if we don't have the answers today, because we don't want to put anybody on the spot, we're happy to get you the answers that you deserve.
Thank you. Given the recommendation is to retain Nordicity to continue with the next phase, should there not be a timeline in place for the report to go to council? It's been an ongoing relationship with them, so I would think at this stage of the game we should be able to put some kind of timeline in place when the final report will go to council, which is not in the recommendation at this stage. And secondly, if the second option was chosen, does it affect the timeline, or would it be the same? I don't know if that can be addressed or whether I should just continue with my questions.
I would say let's just continue with the questions. We'll get them all down, and then if at the end if staff have the answer, they will answer you. I just let's get all the questions out so then we don't go point counterpoint point counterpoint. We just kind of questions and answers. Wonderful. Thank you.
Page 2 of the report, there's a list of items that were being worked on by staff from October 21 to present. Is this the list that the selected consultants will be working with, working towards an objective of recommending the size, location, and the content of the center? 3, can there be a better explanation for the 50,000 or the 50% increase required if we go out to RFP? Fourthly, is it the experts or the consultants who are going to determine the role of the task force moving forward in this process? Because there is a reference to the task force and that they will continue to be involved in some way. It's just clarification in terms of who's going to make that decision and where it's going. And the 5th point, has Nordicity and their architecture partners, Giamo, been involved in arts center or theater builds in their previous experiences? We're just not clear whether they are or not. And I didn't think we'd get to the 4 minutes. Thank you.
5:06 with a little bit of banter back and forth. So we did all right. We did all right. So I'm just going to look for more comments because more questions could come out of that. And then I will, I don't, as I said, don't want to put staff on the spot today, but we would get you the answers you deserve. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anyone else from the audience that would like to come up and speak to this? Well, then you had it all at 5 minutes. Wonderful. Anybody from online?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Madigan. We do have a number of attendees participating remotely. Again, if you'd like to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. We do have one individual that would like to address the standing committee, and we will unmute you. If you can please state your name.
Hi there. This is Makpulu Aipali. I just wanted to attend this meeting. I never have attended a meeting like this before. And I've known about this project, but I just want to put it out there that I hope that the Indigenous community can be consulted in moving forward in terms of culture. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for attending the meeting the first time ever, and I assure you that our staff has always worked very hard to make sure that the culture of the area is reflected in everything that we do. So I'm going to call for the last time if there's anyone from the audience or online that would like to speak to this. You have up to 5 minutes. Seeing none. I'm going to request a mover and a seconder. And actually, I'm going to request somebody to move something in regards to PRC 2022-07, the Arts and Culture Feasibility Plan, because we have a couple different options. Acting Mayor Hull, or is it Mayor Hull?
Well, just how about Keith?
God bless you, Keith. Thank you.
I guess I would like to move this forward, but I'd like to move it forward in the context of having some of these questions answered.
Yes.
And or if it is the will to have more context to these questions, then I would be prepared to even have both sent forward to council so that the full council could hear the answers and then be able to move this forward.
Okay. That's very good. Director Culver, I'm not putting you on the spot whatsoever. You know that. Would you be able to have these answers in full for the next council meeting, or do you have the answers now?
Thank you, Chair. I think in the interest of helping the members of the public and the committee in its decision making, I can come most of the way, I think, in answering the questions. But in between now and council, I can also spend a bit more time making sure that the answers are complete. So I took notes, and the timeline question regarding option A, option B, we've had a preliminary work plan draft come from Nordicity in dialogue about how we would move forward. That work plan draft at this point is indicating somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 months for completion. Once we get the green light from council, if that was the option that was chosen, they would be moving forward. So that would be the estimated timeline scope. Having said that, as this council is very much aware, Projects take left and right turns all the time, so I would hold that as an estimate. In terms of option B, going to another consultant completely, we would need to add 3 months because there is the month it takes for us to develop an RFP and make sure that it's complete, going through filters of that our procurement process require. There's a month when it has to be out in the market by law, it's 30 days, and then evaluation can take somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the number of proponents. And then there's the award process. So that's about the 3-month scale that we look at when we go to market. And then following that, it would be subject to the consultant's availability and capacity for them to determine through the work plan that's been agreed upon how long they expect all the work to take. So I can't really answer that one without having a proponent to speak to. However, I think Nordicity's estimate is probably at least a benchmark that can be looked at. Details of the bid. I'm not sure I took the wrong note because I'm not sure I remember the question entirely, but I'll move on, and if it comes back to me, I'll come back to it. The rationale behind the 50% increase between timeline or proposal A and proposal B, or recommendation A and B. We did some research and came up with a few peer municipalities that are entertaining the same kind of idea of this feasibility assessment to completion of feasibility. And so we have an estimate of what it would be like if we went out to market, which is where the $150,000 number comes from. The $100,000 number comes from a discussion with Nordicity about the scope and range of engaging GIMO and the processes that would be required to narrow it down to a bullseye, and come back to council with a building, a location, a scope in terms of what the building contains, and the sizing. Role of the task force, we believe that we've indicated that, from a staff perspective, and I know from a council perspective, we'd like to engage the community as much as it's possible to do so, which is why we've indicated in the report that that the task force may still have a role. So we would be encouraging this in either case with either option to ensure that we believe that the task force is well established. We believe it has the right people representing the right community interests on it. So we would encourage the consultant to engage that. How exactly, I can't say, as the work plan would belong to them, not us. The feasibility experience that that Nordicity has, they do have experience with Art Center feasibility and also other feasibility projects. So we were confident that they were qualified at the stage of procurement when they were awarded, and we would continue to feel the exact same way going forward. And then I will also address Makpalu's question, which we're always very pleased to get feedback from Makpalu and from any of our Indigenous advisors and community members. So yeah, there is a duty to consult anytime a new construction is undertaken, and so there would be discussions at that point. But at the same time, I think Makpalu's point was more to the idea of engaging them in the cultural conversation about what the building might represent and contain. And I think that's great advisement that we can certainly build into whichever consultant direction council directs us to take on. And then, the list of items. So thank you to CAO Skinner for helping me remember question 2. So the list that the selected consultant will be working with, so that list is actually representative of the list that was developed by Nordicity in consultation with us. There are some new pieces to it, like economic impact assessment and other things that I think would be woven in as well. So yes, that plus some additional work to get us from the stage we're at now through to completion. Oh, and also, sorry, I will back up on the question of the differentiation between option A and option B. We also would be anticipating with, if option B was selected, that a new consultant will need to they'll need at least to dissect and redo, or at least dissect and analyze what Nordicity had created in phase 1. And so we don't really have an idea of exactly how detailed that would be or how much that would have to be undertaken. But we're anticipating some of that, whereas in option A, Nordicity would be picking up their own work and moving forward as we had intended, with the difference being they lead the work versus staff. So hopefully all of those answers, and I apologize are for a little bit of the mix-up in trying to provide clear answers, but if there are any other questions following my answers, I'd be happy to answer them.
CEO Skinner.
Thank you, through the chair. I did have one clarification I was hoping that Director Culver would hit. I believe that on page 2 of the report, Mr. Rob Hart was questioning, is mostly the items that Nordicity has already worked on with staff, and that there is some additional scope that would be included ultimately in the work that's either tendered or is sole source to the existing provider in order to bring things to conclusion. So there is another remaining task to get to that sizing and et cetera.
Thank you, CAO. That's exactly correct. I'm sorry I wasn't flipping back and forth between the reports, so apologies for not picking up on the accurate depiction of the question.
Okay, so just for clarity for the people at home, the people in the audience, just to really bring this down to if option A, Keith has moved that we move both to, and I will look for a seconder after I ask this question. If option A is used, we're looking at 5 to 6 months, and if option B is used or chosen with the whole of council, we're looking at an additional 3 to 4 months on top of that. So we're looking to 8 to maybe 10 months of completion of the study.
So thank you, Chair. Again, both need to be completely rationalized as estimates, but Nordicity has indicated a 5 to 6 month window for the currently proposed draft work plan. And yes, there's a 3-month turnaround on RFPs in a good case scenario. So 3 to 4 months is accurate. And then the rest of that is subject to whomever is awarded out of that RFP process. But if we use Nordicity's as a benchmark, we're looking at probably about 9 months.
Wonderful. Thank you. Do we have a seconder for Acting Mayor Hull's motion? I'm going to ask Keith if you want to speak to it.
Well, I do. I've got a host of questions or some comments as to maybe to justify why I'd like to see this move forward.
So I was just going to ask the clerk, as the chair, am I allowed to second it? Then I will. You can ask your questions, but you have a seconder in me.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so I guess if I may, the rationale for requesting to have this move to council would be, one, I think that this is a decision that is significant to the community as a whole, and it deserves the full conversation of council for their input as it relates to the next steps to move forward. The second is, and I don't know if anyone else feels the same around the table, but I'm a little uncomfortable. Hopefully I'm misreading this, and that would be just fine. But we hired a consultant. It's an identified consultant within a report, and yet we have a second option that would be to go to the open market to retain the services of potentially someone else. And I'm not in a position, and therefore I'm looking for an additional 2 weeks to be able to formulate intelligent questions as to why I would move on from consultant A, who's been identified, and quite frankly, hire consultant B. I agree with Mr. Hart's comments with relation to timelines. And I fully appreciate that some of those timelines may be moving targets today as it relates to whether we do go with A or B. But I think that once A or B is defined, that there should be set targets put in place or timelines, so that if said timelines are achieved, excellent. If they're not achieved, there's some accountability coming back to either this body or to the next body as to relates to why those timelines were not met. I'm still not 100% clear on the difference in the 50K. So again, I just would like the opportunity to have those questions asked over the next 2 weeks. I think I've got a couple of others, but in the interest of time and the interest in the fact that I'm asking for this opportunity for the next 2 weeks, I'll make sure that they're thoroughly answered and or that I'm prepared to ask them and have them answered at that time. The only other comment, if I could make, specific to, because I believe in moving this project forward, and it's a shift in the culture and the language as it relates to our reports. And that is that one of the pages, 3, 4, it doesn't matter, it referred to operating costs and the subsidy. And I'd like to see, and I'm directing this through you, Chair, to our CAO, that word should be investment. And I think that there was a presentation several weeks ago from Theatre Collingwood referencing the fact that minor hockey would not be expected to play on ponds today, and I believe that. I think that we could have been better in delivering a better product as it relates to the facilities they use, but they're not playing on ponds. And I think that to be able to deliver those services in terms of the ice surfaces, there's a significant subsidy. It's or a better word, investment that is made in those user groups, whether it be minor hockey, our incredibly successful women's program, the Blues, and others. And I think that the approach needs to be the same for our arts and culture community as it relates to this project. It's an investment, not a subsidy. And the context is in reference to the ongoing operating after the fact, once this is potentially built. So.
Right.
So that's it, sir. So I appreciate the time and I appreciate the opportunity to move it forward and hopefully be able to speak to it further with the whole body 2 weeks from now.
Any Councillor Carrier?
I don't see the green light here, but
No green light on that one. That one's always on. That's
thanks. for
welcome.
telling me
Welcome
now.
to my seat.
I'm glad I was muttering earlier. Just through you, respectfully, to Acting Mayor Hall. Investment, I reject the term taxation because I see taxation as an investment, and we shouldn't shy away from that language. We should hold it up as to the shining light that it is. Tax dollars are an investment in our community, and I'm happy to say taxation when it's taxation because I see that as an investment, not a burden. So I know it's the marketing, and I don't want to get into a major discussion, but I see it the same way you do. I just prefer the language of taxation because that's how I see tax dollars, especially having served for 13 years. I'm Johnny come lately to this issue. I've had some feedback from the community, and I do have some questions. And referring it, just for clarification, are we referring it to council or Strategic Initiatives Committee? I asked that question because Strategic Initiatives Committee allows public participation again, I believe, where a council meeting would not.
So looking at this, but I'm going to look to the clerk. I'm not even going to try to answer this. I'm just going to look to the clerk. I'm assuming it's going to council because it says council. So Councillor Carrier would be going back to council.
Okay. I have a number of questions. On page 4 of 6 or 13 of 35 of the agenda, where it says based on reviews of recent RFPs from other municipalities, could we have a clarification, please, as to what other municipalities, so that we can see for ourselves if it is a comparator group that I would have agreed with. When we get into Appendix resource number 1, which is the feasibility study for an arts and cultural center in Collingwood, I have a couple of questions on that. On page 6 of that report, which is within the executive summary, scenario 1 says a 400 to 600 seat performing center And scenario 2 is an 800-seat performing arts center. And they do talk about how it's animated primarily, yada, yada, yada. When I was on council before, the late, great Barbara Wider always said to me that we wanted a smaller theater so that we met the threshold of a non-unionized theater, which I thought was around 360 to 380. I'm not sure, but if that could be clarified by staff, because the operational costs back when it was discussed prior to 2011 was that it was substantial operating costs to go to a larger unionized version. And not to be anti-union, it's just coming down to costs. Also, the business model, which I think is a significant statement, and I would like an update through you to Director Culver. The business model says that the analysis of Collingwood's regional demographics and household spending showed that Collingwood's market size does not alone justify a major performing arts center, despite its faster than average growth. Has that changed? Has that professional opinion from our consultants changed? If we're going to have a presentation as part of the council meeting, because we're going to be answering questions, could we have maybe a synopsis of the or shortened version of the original staff presentation? And I'm going to suggest to you that even though I've read some of this documentation, that there's probably a lot of people out in the public who are only paying attention now because it's election time, as opposed to maybe not paying attention earlier during this process. And it might be an opportunity to have a more informed electorate regarding that. Sorry, just going to flip through. I wanted to make a comment to Dean Culver, to Director Culver and his staff in response to the paid ad that was put in the ad for the Jazz and Blues Festival. I reject the premise of the ad. I don't think it helped relations between the community and the decision makers and our professional staff. And I wanted to endorse the hard work and recommendations of our staff. I have seen 13 plus years of experience working with professional staff, and you have an exemplary staff, CAO, and I want to just emphasize my support and endorsement of the hard work and commitment they have to the town of Collingwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Excellent questions. Just to add to Keith's comments, those questions make me want to have 2 more weeks to get a better understanding. I'd love to hear about the union, non-union. Director Culver, I'm not going to ask you to answer those today. And then as per policy, I believe Councillor Kerr's answers can be just displayed to all of council through an email, if that's okay with you, Chris.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
yes.
excellent. Vice Chair McLeod, thank you so much for holding the card there for quite a long time. It's very hard for these eyes. There we go. Go ahead, Marion. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions about the staff report that's on the table right now as well. And one of them is to do with the sort of the beginning paragraphs where a timeline of what the staff has done and what this task force has done is written out. And I'm curious to know, like, how has this task force then been disbanded? And how is it possible that they only had 2 meetings before deciding that well, I don't know what's happened. I don't understand how it is that a task force only had 2 meetings and in the second meeting decided that we needed to go back and spend more money, taxpayers' money to follow this process along, when I thought we had decided that we were going to not employ, but to, lean on our citizens to help us out. So I'm confused about how this came to pass. And I'm also, if in this report that comes to council, could we talk a little bit about how much was already spent on the first batch of recommendations on the Nordicity report? I remember approving it, but I can't remember how many dollars it was. And so if we're going back to spend more taxpayer dollars on this when we could have done a bunch of it, when the task force could have done a bunch of it. I'm confused about that as well. So, and who was on the task force? I don't know who that is either. So those are some of my questions. Like, why was there only 2 meetings? I'm struggling with some of these facts and how this came to pass, that we're here now and not further along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And those questions are directed towards Director Culver, I'm assuming. Putting my glasses back on so I can see a yay or a nay.
Well, I'm happy to have them answered in whatever it is that's going to come to us at council. Yeah, it's very confusing to me because I mean, even our affordable housing task force, they've met, I don't know, 40 times. And, but this only met twice, and it's very odd to me.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other comments from the committee? I don't have any. Councillor Berman doesn't have any, so I will go back to you, Acting Keith.
Thank you. I'll just be very brief, and that is that this council of original 9 had made a decision to move forward with the investigation and investment into the feasibility of an arts center. I think there are many in the community who would look back to the 2 previous studies and suggest that the work had already been done, the justification had been done, and we could have been moving this along a lot further than we have to date. So quite frankly, I'm not interested in revisiting the feasibility document that has already been prepared. That work's been done. What I am interested in is getting clear answers to what the justification is and who is going to do the work for either 100,000 or 150,000, and clear timelines. So whether it's an opportunity for us or the next council, there's accountability as to when people can expect decisions made. That's what we're looking at today. And that's what I would like to see move forward for the next 2 weeks for discussion and ultimately for approval so that staff can get on with the work of either moving forward with the current or perhaps going to the market for the second. One last comment. I am not disagreeing, sir, with the semantics as to taxation, surplus, investment, etc. I was simply highlighting, I think, through the term that traditionally as a community, we have invested more so in our recreation facilities that facilitate our minor sport versus the arts and cultural community. And I'm just saying that I think that it's time to invest. And therefore, when I look at the language that's used, I just simply am stating that it's an investment. However we term it, it is an investment. That's all. Thank you.
Excellent. A lot of great questions today. We have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to just read this in. That staff report PRC 2022-07 Arts and Culture Center feasibility completion be received, and that council approve expenditure of $100,000 from the Arts and Culture Legacy Fund to support continuation of consultation work with NGL Nordicity Group to identify a final location, size, and composition of the Community Arts and Culture Center in Collingwood. Or, yeah,
could I simply table, and I'll look through you to the clerk as to the appropriate wording, but it would just simply be that
both these, both the options in the approved, so I don't have to read it all.
Staff report PRC 2022-07 Arts and Culture feasibility completion be received, and that both options be referred to the full council.
Much better than. Very brief. I like that one. Thank you, sir. Yes. So, yes, what Keith said, that both move forward for the whole of council to decide at the next scheduled update. Go ahead, CAO.
Thank you, Chair. There are a couple of fact-based questions that were asked that we can answer at council. Happy to do so. But if you do have time today, that we could also voice a couple of those comments so that they're in the community for the next 2 weeks, if you wish.
I do wish. I never like to put staff on the spot, because I think information is what's really going to get out there, so we don't have conflicting stories within the community, because as Keith eloquently put it, we just want to get this, we just want to get it figured out and get it started, and we want to know when. So go ahead, please, CEO.
Thank you, Chair. I actually will ask Director Culver to come back on and run through a few of those. And if I think he's left anything out that I have the info for, I'll add it at the end. Thank you.
Welcome back, Director Culver.
Thank you, Chair. I've taken some notes of the questions that I heard. So hopefully, I think I can provide some high level, and then I can know if there's any details to be built in through the time between now and the council meeting. So the peer estimates, the peer group, so Vaughan was one comparator, and sorry, while I just see if I can find the other comparator. The other one we were able to find was in Fredericton. So those are two peers that we found that are in not exactly the same process, but they're in the similar process. And with respect to the clarification of house sizing for whether union costs come into play or not, I'd have to go back. I'm gonna have to research into the feasibility document and remember where the thresholds were. I don't have that at my fingertips, unfortunately. The next question was related to the business model, and has the consultant changed their mind on I'm not sure what. But I will say that no, the feasibility study, the phase A of the feasibility study, phase one, I should say, has been very consistent in terms of how it anticipates them being applied. But I will say, I think the question was related to whether this was the appropriate, whether the size of Collingwood was being taken into consideration. And I think that the short answer to that question is yes. The size of Collingwood is taken into consideration, which is why there's a reference to the larger house being a more regional facility, and that the regionality of that facility would have some expenses attached to it. But the big interesting thing was that between the two sizes in that scope, the operating cost differentiation was not super substantial. So it left some questions about what is the ideal application of a facility in the Collingwood region. And then that actually, to further answer Councillor Carrier's question, I think that is what phase two of the feasibility study is designed to do, is to help dig in more on those details and facts and come up with more rationale behind what size is being recommended. So hopefully that helps with that answer a little bit. In terms of the presentation to council, we can definitely provide the presentation that Nordicity had provided when they delivered the phase one study. That can be done, no problem whatsoever. And then in terms of cost spent, I know for sure that the initial phase one study was $50,000 budget allocated by council. There has been some additional spending through operational means to help keep Nordicity aligned with the project and use them for advice as we've gone through work with the task force and next steps that we've done. So there are some additional costs. I don't have those at my fingertips, but I can provide those to council for sure. And then the question about two meetings. So the first meeting was when we, after consulting with Nordicity and coming up with sort of a list of tasks or a task for the task force to undertake, we presented it at the first meeting and provided some time in between the first meeting and the second meeting to get feedback on that task and any methodology questions that the members might have. And essentially the goal was to develop as much comfort as possible with the task being asked of the volunteers. However, in the second meeting, it was very obvious that there wasn't comfort with the task being asked of the group, and so that's when it became clear to us that we needed to change direction because again, our next steps and our process forward was contingent upon that participation by members of the stakeholder group. So once we felt like that was at risk, we didn't feel that there was a path forward. So this path forward rejigs things, and hopefully we can still include the community in that consultation. I'm sure that we can. And the consultant will, I guess, have the ability to work more closely with the committee. I'm not 100% sure about the total scope of the gap filling, but anyway, that's where we're at, and hopefully some of those answers were a little bit helpful. And if I missed any, please let me know.
Thank you very much, Director Culver. I am looking to the CAO. Thank you very much for your answers. We appreciate them. CAO?
Thank you, Chair. There was a couple things I wanted to mention as well that I've talked to members of the community about, and also have been brought up today. So there is an approach that had been being practiced up to the second task force meeting that involved some consulting with Nordicity. An economic model is one thing that comes to mind. To return back to council with a recommendation that was in line with council's resolution to come back around the end of the year or early next year. So that option was not one of the two that are on the table here today, but it was the one that we had been on track for and proceeding with to that time. There was a question about procurement, and I think that through the chair to the acting mayor, why could or would we might consider another consulting firm? The reason that we would do that is that the original award to Nordicity and their subcontractor was for the feasibility study. So now at this point, it is open to staff and to council to make a clear decision on whether this is some extra work because it makes sense for whatever reasons, or if we wish to start with a clean slate, the feasibility study in place, and just a new RFP. So we can talk more about that at the council meeting, but that's why that option is open. That named consulting group had not been promised this additional work. So it would be up to the town to, offer or tender it. And if it was tendered, certainly that company could still bid as well. I do believe that when the original feasibility study was done, there were some questions around what size of a theater would make sense. And then the proper and appropriate parameters, through the chair to Councillor Carrier, what the implications would be at those various sizes. And one of the things that we did know about, or certainly the consultants knew about more so than me, were the union or other considerations depending on the size that was selected to be best for the community. And I think it might have been in a previous meeting that the acting mayor had mentioned, this is certainly something where we're looking at the long-term legacy needs for the community and how to marry this with a broad slate of needs for multiple groups, and how to make sure that when we invest, because it will be a large investment, that we consider those broad slate of needs. With respect to the task force, I do think that we talked about continuing with the task force, and that we will need to look at the task force membership and whether the folks who are in the task force are, in fact, want and need to continue, and if those are the right folks. I know there's been some comments from the community around whether the task force should be someone who's informing the consultant and staff, whether the task force, for example, should be informing council. Whether or not there should be council members, in fact, on that task force. And I think it really does depend on the type and immediacy of advice that we need from the community. So it behooves thinking through those considerations as we, and council actually decides how to move forward, because we do value the voices from the community, most certainly. I did want to bring up that with respect to the expenditures that we have in town, Parks, Recreation and Culture sounds like parks and hockey, But there are a number of investments that we already do make into the cultural space. There's space available at a discounted price in the Simcoe Street Theatre. We have our, art mural and sculpture programs. So I think that I know that the folks maybe who are physically here today are very cognizant of that, but for those who may be listening and not as aware of the arts programs, Collingwood does have a bigger program than most our size, and one that I'm quite proud of. Watch for the unveiling of the latest sculpture to come. And finally, I do think we have a stellar cast of staff, and not that we don't always look into things if anything comes up. And there have been concerns about past projects falling to the wayside, or maybe there hadn't been enough momentum built up at the time for those projects to drive forward. And from a staff perspective, depending on whatever the direction is from council and the number of priorities that council has, good performance for staff is to address all of those priorities, not one over another, except as council has directed it. And if this is one of them, we'll certainly be driving forward with that work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had a lot of discussion over this, and we have a motion on the table. So I am going to call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion that both options move to council as a whole, put your cards up. All those, that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much for all the discussion. We've learned a lot today, and thank you for showing interest again. And we appreciate you, and we've heard your voice again. And we look to expedite this process, and we've got 2 weeks to get us any more answers that do come up. So you're welcome to stay, but if you do not, I will not be upset if you get up and leave now and enjoy a typical rainy afternoon in Collingwood. Number 7, reports and minutes of other committees. Can I get a mover and seconder to contain there? There we go. Moved by Acting Mayor Hall, seconded by, thank you, Councillor Berman, that the minutes of various committees and boards provided below be received and recommendations contained there be within. 7.1, Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes, June 16th, 2022. 7.2, Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes, June 9th, 2022. 7.3, Museum Advisory Committee minutes, June 23rd, 2022. And Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee, June 9th, 2022. All those in favor? Passed unanimously. 8.1.
Sorry, when do we ask questions about the various minutes?
Well, we can ask questions right now, sir.
Under 7.1, which is page 2 of 4 of the minutes, or 17 of 35 of the agenda, we received for deputations under update on accessible transit. The talked about a new service operator has been secured, and that the service is slightly changing. It may be better. I'm assuming it is better. I'm just wondering, is there a service gap between the implementation of a new service provider and the former service provider, or is it bridged?
Great question, and I'm sure that we've all got that. So I'm going to look towards Clerk Elmas. Thank you so much for being so quick to put your card up. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Carrier. There was an update at one of the committees recently around the new transit provider and the move to on-demand service. And the intention is to move to the on-demand service in a 3-step process. and to also transition away from some of the accessible approaches that are replaced in a different way. Some of the accessible transit that's currently provided by the Red Cross. I've not been informed of any service gap, but there will be changes in how several of the services are delivered as we onboard the new or renewed service providers. So I will talk to Director Slama and ask her to inform council if in fact there will be any service gaps, but I don't believe that to be the case.
Okay, thank you. And then on item 5.2, where it says transportation and accessibility update engineering, it was talking about the deficiencies in some of the crosswalks and street crossings. Is that something that is being referred to the 2023 budget as a priority to make our community more accessible to those who are more vulnerable than others?
CEO Skinner?
Actually, I didn't catch the whole question, Chair. Which minutes? It's the
same minutes. It's 5.2. The last one on the transportation was 5.1, and this is on the same page of those minutes. So it's transportation and accessibility update engineering services, where Mike Latimer reviewed projects engineering services is working on now that would be of interest to the AAC and AODA compliant, which includes a number of street crossings, trail crossings. So it didn't say in the minutes was it being actively worked on and there was a timeline projected for it to be addressed?
CEO?
in our. We can also provide further information. However, in the work plan for this year, which has been impacted somewhat by the lead of the our engineering manager leaving, we have several. I believe it's 4 or 5 areas where the warrants for crossings are being examined, i.e. what's the priority for those, and have put aside funds for 1 or 2 to be constructed in 2022. So we'll figure out where those are and let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the question that I have on the second set of minutes is 7.2, my favorite one, is the BIA. Page 5 of 7 or page 24 of 35. And my question will be through you to the clerk, since Sarah Almas is the one who addressed it. 7.1 is the MOU amendments update. The final sentence talks about the general manager of the BIA attending council department heads, or sorry, not council, staff department heads once a month to strengthen the communication between the BIA and the town and ensure staff have an understanding of significant projects being undertaken by the BIA. Does the memorandum of understanding clarify what's significant and what's not significant? Because I think that is what the issue was the last time we had an issue with the BIA making investments in the downtown core.
Clerk Almas?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Madigan. I think that's a two-part question. So the board was supportive of the recommendations for changes to the MOU based on some of our discussions earlier this spring about the archway. However, we wanted to ensure from an administrative perspective that all departments were on the same page when it came to various items that are identified within the MOU, and felt that there might be an opportunity for a short conversation as a pilot with our general manager, either attending a department head prior to a BIA board meeting or right after a BIA board meeting to share that discussion with department heads and how we can work together to see it implemented in accordance with our MOU.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
That's it for me.
Excellent. Okay. So sorry for jumping the gun. And before we go to 8.1, I see that Ms. Morrison is here. I apologize. Please come up now. I apologize that we had a very packed house, and they were very excited to get their started. And when 2:00 came, I did not see you.
But
so
my apologies. I was a few minutes late. So thank you for making time now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And just there's people watching at home, just introduce yourself and let them know why you're here.
Yes.
And the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think someone is going to be, yes, they are running my slides. Thank you. I'm Rosalyn Morrison. I'm chair of the volunteer board of directors for the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay. And Collingwood has in the past supported many of our activities, and we are grateful for that. And just wanted to give people a high level in terms of what we do. We are a volunteer-driven, not-for-profit think and do tank who has a great vision. Next slide, please. That vision looks at the power of 100,000 people and the power of this beautiful place that we all call home. And so when you look at 6 existing municipalities, Meaford, Town of the Blue Mountains, Grey Highlands, Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, and Clearview, there's an opportunity that's already been spoken about at today's meeting where we can put the talent and the resources and the energies of a larger geographic footprint of people together to achieve wonderful things and to tackle some of our most pressing issues. Next slide. So the vision really is all about that. It is harnessing this power of people in place. And the board met this year on a strategic directions plan. And we included one very important word in our vision. So we've had this vision for a few years, but we've come to understand in the larger conversations around sustainability that we really need to be looking at an integrated and holistic picture. And that is, we want to grow social, environmental, and economic prosperity. And why would we want to do that? Because they're integrated, and we can have more efficiencies and have better results if we do so. And all towards being the smartest, greenest, healthiest, and most caring region in Ontario. Next slide, please. What we found is that there are many wonderful conversations happening across the region, and for some reason, these conversations are not connected. And so we can have the same conversations about affordable housing issues or environmental impacts or the arts and culture. And what would happen if we wove these conversations together? Well, we believe that we could tap into a greater pool of talent, a greater pool of knowledge, and a greater pool of resources. So really the Institute is a connector. It's a knowledge sharing platform, which is unique, and it enables more collaboration across sectors in the region. Next slide, please. So our purpose or our mission is really to hone into this interconnection of 5 priority areas: arts and culture, social justice, the environment, social innovation and business, and health and well-being. And then to connect 4 major sectors: business, nonprofits, government, and philanthropy, to take all the learnings that we've had through the pandemic and figure out how can we do things differently? How can we do things better? And so we have 3 simple things that we do. We connect people, we conduct research and share the knowledge from other jurisdictions so that we're working with data to make effective decisions, and we're fostering collaboration. Next slide, please. So our 2022 work plan, and the reason I'm here, of course, is to request your continuing partnership on our programming, is inspired and builds on the last few years, and we've learned a lot together. In 2020, we pivoted to online discussions. We had 4 major events looking at the big picture of how we could do things differently. And we produced a report called Mapping Our Road to Recovery. In 2021, an amazing thing happened. Collingwood decided to become a model Sustainable Development Goal 11 community. We're all very excited about that. Why? Because SDG Goal 11 has the kinds of milestones that we would all love to see progress on: affordable housing, environmental impacts, integrated planning, looking at the way that we protect arts and natural heritage. So it's a beautiful goal that, again, mirrors this idea of looking at things holistically for better outcomes. So we participated in that first Collingwood World Summit, and we've decided to focus on 4 of the resolution items from that: affordable housing, environmental challenges, and one of the most important, I think, connecting innovation towns and innovation districts so that we can do things in a much more concerted effort. And in particular, resolution item number 38 out of that 2020 inaugural summit, which are 10 pilot projects. And I think that we'll get to the meat of those in the upcoming 3rd Collingwood World Summit. Last year, we had a groundbreaking online multi-sector discussion series called Our Sustainable Future. And we unpacked, what does that mean exactly, that word sustainability? And it's really all about looking at things in this interconnected way and doing things in a way that we are ensuring that future generations enjoy what we have today. And in fact, we're improving things at the same time. And this year, our group created a bi-weekly learning group called Social Finance and Housing. And that's because the various municipalities across the region were looking at affordable housing. Social finance are new tools for accessing more capital to do things. And that's what we're learning about. We're learning about community bonds. We're learning about community land trusts. We're learning about things that can help accelerate progress on some of these difficult issues. And we're also participating in a national housing lab with Social Innovation Canada and Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Next slide, please. So here's our ambitious 2022 programming slate. It feeds off of everything that we've learned over the last 3 years. This year, we're having an online discussion series called Local Sustainable Economies. We've had 2 events so far. We had our first one with chief administration officers from across the region presenting what are the key elements of sustainable communities. The second one we had on June 22nd, and that was all about looking at this sustainable, affordable housing issue and what kind of data do we have to inform our decision-making. 2 local reports were unpacked, and the community conversation was fabulous, and a lot of you were at that event. So thank you very much for attending that. In the fall, we're going to have 4 other events: New Directions for Business. There are a lot more businesses that are looking at how could they develop triple bottom lines. We're looking at the role of arts and culture in local economies. We're looking at a green economy. What does that look like, and how can that fire up new business? And we're looking at the role of philanthropy in multi-sector partnerships. We want to map out and showcase social enterprises. These are enterprises that look at profit, social progress, and environmental progress. We want to conduct a feasibility study for a green economy hub. There are green economy hubs happening across the country, very effectively working with business on lowering our collective carbon footprint. We want to expand the Collingwood Carbon Footprint Challenge across the region and help CCAT and many of the other teams to do that. We want to support a forum for arts organizations and artists. We've never had a regular arts forum, and that's something that we can help launch through our new regional arts and culture strategy and the new organization that has been created from that strategy, SGB Arts Network. And that is being supported now through philanthropy and connecting people from across the region in that sector. As I mentioned, we're participating in the National Housing Lab and learning a lot. And we want to be able to showcase municipal levers to accelerate progress on affordable housing. Amazing work happening in Collingwood. Amazing work happening in many other municipalities. How do we bring that together so that we can all work and act and learn more quickly and have that action that could be collaborative? The last thing, again, is these pilot projects coming out of the UN Habitat and Towns Collingwood World Summit. And if you've never attended one, they are fascinating. This one's happening, as you may know, October 31st and November 1st. And most important at the end is to help community identify indicators on progress. So we can make many investments, we can all participate and use a lot of our energies, but how do we know we're making progress? So let's identify some of those indicators, tie them back to SDG Goal 11. Next slide, please. The Sustainable Development Goals are all interconnected. You can see number 11 there, sustainable cities and sustainable communities. That is a link for us to learn more about the milestones and the kinds of targets that we might be considering for indicators. Next slide, please. So the request for partnership support. We believe that if we work together, we can learn and take what we've learned through the pandemic towards creating a sustainable future for generations. If not, when? So we request $5,000 in partnership support for our 2022 programming, which will match our own investment that we've raised through philanthropy. The benefits for residents include this unique community engagement and access to the regional discussion platform, knowledge sharing of best practices from other jurisdictions, sharing resources for collaborative projects for greater impact and accelerating progress. Thank you very much for considering our request and creating a better future for all together.
Thank you very much. Once again, I apologize for the wait,
No problem.
but I thank you very much for waiting around. That was a very well thought out. If, any comments or questions from the committee members? Well, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Have a lovely afternoon. Departmental updates. Pretty River Parkway Beautification Update, Director Culver.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I'll just pull my notes up here. So a while ago, and I honestly I know Council had asked for an update on what was happening with the Pretty River Parkway median strip. So I'm pleased to say that that we are still intending to have it substantially completed this year. We are waiting for, so right now, as of today, the tender document is sitting with procurement. And in fact, I just saw it go over to procurement earlier. We also expect to have the 90% draft of tender drawings for review. We're hopeful that next week we'll be able to issue it for tender, subject to purchasing approval. It goes out for 30 days. So we'll be looking into early August for the close of tenders. Second week in August, we would hopefully, again, subject to evaluation time and any other logistics and technical issues, we will be looking to hopefully execute the contract if it comes back within the town's allocated budget. If it does not, then we would be looking at a council meeting on August 18th to take a look at adjusting the budget. And then subject to that approval for adjustment, we would follow with the contract signing, and then we'd be looking for substantial completion or substantial performance by, say, November, December. And then in spring of 2023, we'd be looking to plant, the town would undertake the project of planting or replanting the medians. Since the last time we discussed this at council, last time that we talked about sort of flat planting beds because of some concerns about the traffic situations there and some MTO regulations. We've since in the intervening time been able to find some examples and some ways that we can do raised planters, so that we are looking at a raised planter. This will be better for salt and sand infiltration into the beds. And provide a little bit more opportunity for good success when it comes to the plants in the median. We also, and we've discussed this with engineering, and engineering has concurred. We also will be retaining, and I'll remind council of the report we had where safety of staff managing those gardens and maintaining those gardens was a prime consideration. So that's being maintained in the adjusted design. And council will also hopefully remember a discussion about the potential for what we call zip banners, or banners that can be raised and lowered from the ground, because that saves us cost on maintenance and execution. But we would like to revisit that subject to budget availability. I just want to give the committee a bit of a heads up or an understanding of why this project is so complicated. So in the new project, we'll be looking at irrigation water because it'll be required for anything to grow there. There is currently irrigation in the median, but it's old. And with this new construction, we'll be needing to implement new irrigation. We have electrical considerations in those beds because of the light standards, which means that we won't be able to dig those beds out. We'll have to hydrovac out the median area, which is a complicated process that will have impacts on traffic control, which is a known challenge, has been a challenge for many, many years. And as mentioned in previous reports to council, it's our prime consideration when it comes to sort of how do we navigate traffic that can be very, very challenging in that location when you're trying to do work on those medians. We also note that the tree vault, the vault that the trees actually sit in, their proximity to the road structure is very close. It's actually right next to the road structure. So things like that we would have considered like moving or removing the tree vaults is not a possibility. And that puts us into some ground stability considerations. We don't want to have things like cave-ins on Pretty River Parkway. So there are certain things parameters that we have to work around that we just can't change. And then finally, we're working very hard to try and preserve the trees that are existing in those medians. They have survived in spite of themselves. They've developed some sort of equilibrium that has allowed them to be there. And we're very conscious about not disturbing those trees with the new effects to whatever we can do, but there is a risk. And I think it's important that the committee and the public understand that, we may be looking at replanting those trees if unfortunately those risks go the wrong way. So that's sort of just an update to give you a sense of timing. We are looking at spring planting. We're looking at some completion of the capital works this year. And then I just wanted to make sure you had a sense of some of the conscious considerations we're putting into the thinking around this project.
Thank you very much, Director Culver. Any questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, sir. I'm going to ask the clerk if there is anybody online or if anyone in the audience that would like to get back up and speak for another 5 minutes on anything that has to do with this committee.
Thank you, Chair Madigan. We do have a couple attendees left. If you'd like to address the standing committee regarding any items within the corporate community services mandate, please raise your hand feature by pressing the button on the bottom of your screen. There is no further interest at this time.
Wonderful. Through the committee, any other business? Acting Mayor Hull.
Thank you. If you deem it as other business, it's actually a question that was related to the presentation from the Institute.
Well, then I am glad that you stuck around. Thank you so much.
Well, it may not be a specific question for the deputant, which, although I appreciate the presentation, the question simply is, I would like to be in a position to support the request. Is something forthcoming, or would staff like me to offer direction? And if so, when is appropriate?
Clerk Almas?
Certainly. Thank you, Chair Madigan. The recommendation, if you want to support the request, would be to provide a notice of motion today, and it could show up on the next meeting.
Please do so.
With your permission, then, Chair Madigan, I would like to provide notice of motion specific to the $5,000 allotment that was requested in support.
Wonderful. And just for the public and for the deputant that is still sitting here, when would that come to council again, please?
Thank you. It would come, Chair Madigan, to the committee and to the public watching. It would show up on the July the 18th council meeting together when this report is published with that agenda.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks, Keith. Any other business? Councillor Carrier.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to either the CAO or to Director Culver, if he's still here. There was some chatter online today before I came to the meeting. I just got tagged with a notification regarding water testing in the harbor. for people that are swimming there? Has the protocols changed for that? And are we looking at changing the protocols because there are a lot of people swimming in that water, and there's a lot more recreation going on in that water than even 12 years ago. So,
Director Culver?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Carrier. So the answer to your question is it's a very, very difficult situation. The pier is one of those places where it's hard for the town to the capital T town to support and encourage swimming there when it's identified by many bodies as being not advisable. So what we've tried to do for a while there, we put in the sort of we'll stay out of the equation and we'll tell people they can't swim there, but the enforceability of that is impossible. So recently, in the past couple of years, last year and this year, we started to take a bit more of an active approach in trying to figure out how to support swimming, or to at least assist in the lowering of risk factors there. So that's where the buoys were employed. Some life-saving devices were employed actually several years ago. And we are taking a look at whether water testing is something that we could take on again. Currently, the way the health unit works is they'll only test areas that are identified as public beaches, which is why they test at Sunset Point. All testing that we've done in the past, and I'm trying to remember the year, I think it was 2015, 16, or 16 and 17 that we undertook testing on our own. Actually, it might have been 17, 18. It had to do with the waterfront master plan and sort of identifying, acknowledging that that people are getting into the water there. So we did some voluntary testing. So we actually sent it to the same lab the health unit uses, but we did do the sample drawing on our own. We did, over the course of 2 years of doing that, identify that the harbor water was actually very, very, very low in terms of E. coli count and parts per million relative to the provincial water quality index. Lower in many ways than other places that we were testing, although it did vary across the harbor, but still well within the provincial water quality index standard at that time. Due to capacity and other priorities, we ceased to do the testing. It does require a fair bit of labor in order to get the testing done, get it sent to the lab, receive it back, and then act on whatever the findings are, if there are actions to have. So we haven't been doing it for a number of years, and again, we're not required to. But this year, with the pool going in for retiling for the next couple of months, we're looking at the redeployment of lifeguards in order to make sure that lifeguards are available for us when we reopen in September. And one of the tasks that's under consideration for them to take on is water testing in those areas that are known to be places where people swim. Again, it's a bit of a temporary fix because when the pool's back in session, we're going to need lifeguards deployed to the pool. However, it's something where we'll have the capacity to do that. Maybe based on those findings, we'll have other decisions to share with council and the public going forward.
Thank you. And I do recall having sat on the conservation authorities, the discussions with solicitors about liability exposure and acknowledging risk. But I'm just going to throw this out for your comment or for your review and consideration. With the intensity of the storms that we're seeing, we know that the runoff, either from parking lots or the water that's coming in from the Pretty River or another system into the harbor, after a storm event, is probably not the safest thing to be swimming in the next 2 or 3 days when it's 94 degrees Fahrenheit or something outside. So it's just something that, hey, we're not advising that you swim in this because it's risky. I get that part, but we're really advising after a storm event that you don't swim in this because you might come up with pink eye or something worse than just the regular hazard. And if that's a discussion that moves forward through the budgeting process, as we're seeing more and more recreational users, I'm not running for the next council, as you know, but it's something that maybe could be referred to a budget process for the next session of a term of council because I mean, I don't see people stopping from swimming there.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Dean?
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, and thanks to Councillor Carrier for that point. I think that it is an area that could be posted permanently with an advisory notice. Again, we're not required to because it isn't necessarily being tested under the provisions or parameters provided by the health unit, but it is something that we could do. And there are advisory placards we have that do talk about not swimming after a rain event. So that's something that we could post as well. Again, in the interest of trying to lower risks for our public, it's not an easy consideration. I do worry about the exposure of liability, but having said that, we know people are swimming there, so doing what we can to support their well-being is probably I think that's always the right thing to do. So thanks for the advice, and we'll consider it going forward.
Thank you very much, Director Culver. I know that's much appreciated by us all, but thank you, Councillor Carey, for bringing that up. Just a reminder to people to stay safe and pink eye or something worse. I don't know what else you could come up with, but I'm just going to try to smile on camera and just move forward. Any other business? Seeing none, adjournment. Acting Mayor Hall, thank you very much. All those in favor? Yeah, see you back here at 5 o'clock. My call to that meeting would be 32 minutes, was way off. So follow me for more gambling tips at bobmadigan.com because I'm obviously useless at it. Thank you.